This show is sponsored by Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today is an entrepreneur, life coach, and lifestyle expert. She has a passion for people and wants more for everyone on this earth. More time, more fun, more self-love, and more indulgence. She is the founder, owner, and CEO of Brianna's Best Life Media, LLC. Please welcome Brianna Bridges. Welcome.
Thank you. What an introduction.
I like that little smile that you had after I said it. It's fun, isn't it? Like hearing yourself introduced.
It is fun. It is.
You want to try my introduction? I'm just teasing you. I'm just teasing you. Just having a little fun with you as we start. So typically on the show, what I like to do is dive into your background story, into what got you to where you are today. And I think we're going to touch on a lot of that because you have a journey that's very similar to many entrepreneurs in that leaving a corporate safe job and then starting your entrepreneurial journey. But something I want to touch on today first is your journey to getting to this studio today. In our setup to this, pre-interview, pre-moments, whatever we want to call those. I'm not completely savvy on those terms yet. We were just talking about how a couple of days ago, you were thinking about the podcast. You had written part of your intake form. You had written some stories and some ideas of what you want to talk about today. And then a day or so later, you were a little bit concerned about those stories. And then today, you were kind of stepping into your power. So I think that speaks so much to the work that you do and kind of performing it on yourself. Yeah. And then also the experience that so many people, so many entrepreneurs that are listening, so many business leaders that are listening, experience in their own lives, just driving into the office or going to a meeting. And so I would love for you to kind of go back a couple of days ago and share with us the experiences that you had from when I first spoke with you and we were excited about meeting.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it's funny. I think what I just called it a few minutes ago is an entrepreneur's identity crisis. And when we first spoke, weeks back, I was over the moon, and I still am and was today. I think what happened a couple of days ago is, I received a piece of feedback, and, as a coach, I have to coach myself all the time and, be okay hearing feedback and noticing when something is like triggering me, why it's triggering me. But I got a piece of feedback that triggered me. And I'm also in this business mentorship program. And so through exploring this identity crisis with my group too in that program, I kind of just spiraled. And I was kind of just in my head, I was like, who am I anymore? What am I even doing? Am I on the right path? And I think that entrepreneurs do this to themselves every so often. And I realized at the end of the day, I kind of calmed down and, yesterday I was fine. And today it grew even more. I grew into this headspace of, this is a baby step toward your ultimate dream is to be known for something and for your story to be told and heard and hopefully help somebody else. And so on the way here, my 2-hour drive here, I was choosing the thoughts that I wanted to have that were going to keep me in the right headspace of this excitement, of this, my voice matters, and this is my opportunity to let it be heard and just stay excited instead of getting in my head and, feeling the fear. And that's kind of what we entrepreneurs need to do all the time is move through the fear and choose, are we going to let it slow us down, or are we going to choose another avenue of thinking about whatever it is you're thinking about that is going to propel you forward rather than, keep you stuck in New Jersey, not driving to Poughkeepsie for a podcast?
That is so funny that the work that we have to do on ourselves is incredible. And we all experience it. We all experience it. And when we think we're out of our own way, we end up seeing another challenge. And I bring that up because then you're here, you made it, right? You're excited, we're talking, we're having a good time. And as soon as I hit the record button, you ended up in your own head again, and you said that to me. Could you share with our audience too? And again, I think this goes right back to the work that you do. What were you saying to yourself in that moment to be able to overcome that moment where you started feeling that anxiety again kind of come up?
Well, I mean, you can't tell right now, but my heart is kind of like still pounding again. But I think what I'm telling myself right now is I am safe. I'm in a safe space, and I know what I'm talking about. So you don't have to keep telling yourself you don't know what you're talking about. You really do know your stuff. And so, yeah, I'm leaning into my knowledge and not doubting myself and repeating, you are safe, because our brains like to tell us that we're not safe. You know, our brains are always thinking from the mode of how do we protect this human that ensconces us. And that's why we resort to these feelings of anxiety. And, you know, you work with your brain to try to deprogram that fear. So. And
the brain wants us to be comfortable.
Right.
And this is uncomfortable sometimes when you don't always do it, right?
Exactly.
I mean, even for me, who comes in here pretty regularly, it sometimes is nerve-wracking or uncomfortable, or in moments during stories, I get a little anxious and everything. And I have to tell myself the same thing: is I'm safe.
Yeah.
For me, I feel like it was almost like all the Zoom meetings that we ended up having during COVID, where I learned I could turn off my camera.
Yeah.
I could just like have a technology issue. Nobody knows. I could just be like, sorry, boss, technology issue.
Yeah.
And kind of take a break if I need to.
Yeah.
And I kind of carried that into our day-to-day life now today of like, hey, I can have a technology issue in my brain and like a little power outage and say, hey, listen, Brianna, it's nice talking to you, but I just need a second now.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
And I think that we can allow ourselves to do that. And the more we allow ourselves to give ourselves a break, the less anxiety we feel.
Absolutely. And going back to my spiraling the other day, my identity crisis, at the end of the day, I was like, I have been working too hard. And that's what's been happening is I've been working too hard, trying to get a new program ready. And by the end of the day, I was like, you know what? You need to take a pause. And I just stopped working for the rest of the day. I like totally vegged on the couch. And what I realized was that was me taking the pause that I needed. But I also realized that I was living through one of those days that I was going to look back on and realize like that was the hurdle. Like that was the moment that you grew just a little bit more. And all of those feelings that you felt throughout the day were the right questions to be asking yourself, because by taking yourself out of your focus, sometimes it's your way of kind of taking a step back and just reevaluating or reinforcing that you're on the right path. And so even though it came to me in a way that felt like a crisis, it led to some profound lessons learned, and it led to me feeling like, okay, this day was really hard. I'm not going to lie about that. But at the end of the day, I feel like I do know even more that I'm on the right path and that I grew, you know?
Yeah. And you got to speak with my coach, Merritt, which is really awesome, because what you're sharing with me, Merritt I've shared with Merritt very similar stories that you just shared. And I feel like her response to me, and you'll probably also attest to this, is it's probably because of a lack of clarity of the direction that I'm going in that day, or the direction that I'm that I'm thinking about. And so when you get that clarity, which those questions that you're asking yourselves help you answer, when you ask those questions and you answer those questions, you start gaining that clarity, and then you start feeling powerful again and stepping into that person.
Exactly.
Part of what you're bringing up reminds me of a lot of the definition of imposter syndrome, right? And part of what we were talking about earlier before the mics were on and everything was the feeling of judgment, the feeling of what can I say, what can't I say, what do I remember, what don't I remember, who am I, as you said on air just now, all feeding into imposter syndrome.
Sure.
And in your bio to me, you shared about your 20s and who you were then and like who you've become today. When we think about imposter syndrome, whether we want to speak about it just as like a subject or even in your own life, how are you kind of like coming to terms with who you are, I guess, and being able to step away from the things that you've experienced in your life?
Yeah, it's interesting because when we cope with things that we've been through in life and, you know, we kind of recover from trauma and we come into a space where we have the room to grow beyond that, you have stages, right? And so when I first became an entrepreneur, I still felt a lot of that past tugging at me. And, you know, just so that it doesn't feel out of context, my past just, you know, I had a lot of influences in my life that made me feel like my voice wasn't important. I felt like my voice got taken away from me. And that kind of set me into a cycle of subverting my voice and succumbing to abusive relationships, not physically, but emotionally abusive relationships. And those have a way of really making you feel powerless. And, you know, I'm fortunate and lucky that I never stopped hearing myself. Like I knew I was always still in there. But growing beyond those years and kind of pulling yourself out of that cycle, you carry a lot of that with you for a really long time. And so coming into entrepreneurship, which was really just, when you think about it, 9 months ago for me, I still carried a lot of that with me. It took me a while to give myself permission. And I've reached another new stage where I'm feeling like that person who I used to be as a young girl, I'm connecting back with her again. And I'm feeling everything I used to love about her again. And I'm allowing that person to come to the forefront again. And that is just so powerful. And it is, it's such a lesson, I think, that when you are an entrepreneur and you are carving your own path, you have no guardrails, right? So you have all the room in the world to kind of do anything that you want. And for me, I knew that what I wanted to do was going to be something that would let me shine, but also help others through the journey that I've been through too. You know, I've recently gotten very interested in internal family systems. I don't know if you've heard of that.
No.
It is basically, it's analyzing the protectors within yourself. And these are the people who come off really strong within you. So maybe something happens at work and like you decide, I need to control this situation. It's the parts of you that have like knee-jerk reactions. And when you recognize these parts of you as protectors of whatever it is that you went through as a child, you get to leverage them with reason rather than letting them kind of run amok. So I've become very interested in this field of study because it is very related to the coaching field. And it's relevant to finding your voice again, because I realized so many parts of me through understanding this area of study, why I fell into who I once was. You know, I wanted to be somebody who carved my own path. And I always wanted to be somebody who worked with other people because I've always been able to see all the nuance in so many people. And, you know, my parents are prime examples of seeing the darkness and the light within one human being and how that makes them so special, and understanding their capacity for love and where it might be limited. And I've always wanted to be able to validate other people's wholeness. So now I get to help other people find their voice, and it's just such an honor.
That's cool. I love that. Validate their wholeness. That's a really good one. I think you did answer the question in terms of like we're talking about imposter syndrome a little bit there. And what you're talking about is that you recognize something in yourself and you're trying to move forward with that.
Yeah.
But on the other side of that, there's this like, as Merritt would call it, this gremlin.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Which is what reminds me of when you were talking about the interfamily piece there. There's this gremlin that is saying maybe that you're not enough,
right,
or that you can't be that girl that you want to be. And so that's where that imposter syndrome happens, because you are that strong, powerful girl.
Right.
You are that person who can be successful and woman that's successful today, right? But you have that gremlin who's telling you a whole different story. And we tend to buy into the negative more than the positive, I think.
Our brains are programmed that way.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's really a challenge, and it takes a lot of self-awareness, and it takes people to help us and to strengthen that belief in ourselves to be able to overcome that voice. And I think that's the voice that we're hearing when we're feeling that imposter moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
But that voice happens at a young age, and it's really hard to shed. And I think our stories are kind of like are what needs to be shared in order to shed it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so that kind of leads me into some of your story of your growing up and your past and how it's gotten you to where you are today.
Yeah.
I also want to give you a little bit of a pass on things here, because I wasn't sure of how. I knew you were a new entrepreneur. I wasn't sure of how new.
Yeah.
And you're like 9 months into your business.
Yes.
So I want to say, like, no wonder you're experiencing this moment of, am I ready for the podcast? Do I know what I want to say? How do I want to say it? Because when we're developing a business and when we're out there as entrepreneurs, 9 months, like I kind of relate everything back to a baby. Yeah. And like, what does a 9-month-old baby look, sound, and feel like? Yeah. And like, I think what we're expecting that 9-month-old baby to do is come on this podcast and be able to speak English fluently and share their thoughts and ideas. And that's essentially what a 9-month-old entrepreneur is like, we're coming on here and we're like, I'm trying to, so I want to give you that, like, I want our listeners to understand that not to put so much weight on ourselves and compare ourselves to a 10-year vet in the business who knows their plan, who's very clear on what they want to do, their purpose, their mission, their pitch, their story. They've said it over and over and over again, and they come on a podcast and boom, it's the same thing. And they could kind of like piece it together. Yeah. None of this is staged, folks. You are on your journey. So I want to share that with our audience, and I also want to, give you that. Thank you. So going into your past, you have a really it's unique it's unique in a sense, right? It's not. There are definitely people who grew up with alcoholism in their family and parents passing at a young age, but it is unique, right? And it's kind of shaped who you are today, and you've learned so many lessons from that. And so I'd love for you to kind of share a little bit about maybe before, obviously, your father had passed and the impact he had, and then what you've learned after.
Yeah, so it's interesting. My father and I mentioned this before we started recording, that there are, now that I've had the space to grow and kind of take a step back, there are a lot of parallels between our lives that I didn't realize. You don't realize in the moment when you're growing up all these things that you're doing that are just like a mirror, right? And when I was a young kid, I always felt like I was going to be something big. Like, I didn't know what it was going to be yet, but I felt like I had it. Like, I had something. And I was theatrical. I was, like, unabashedly just, like, myself, throwing outfits together, putting on little plays in my living room. My sister had to play Aladdin so many times to my Jasmine. And, I really felt like, I didn't feel like the world was my stage per se, but like I really felt sure of who I was, and I was just excited all the time.
How old do you think you were at that time?
I don't know, 7, 8. I didn't know this when I was a kid, but my dad actually, before he got into the business world, was an actor, and he was supposedly so good that he was picked for Harry Truman's personal acting troupe. And unfortunately, because of the times and where he grew up in East Texas, he had to turn down his first role because they wanted him to play a gay man. And, he was born in 1943. So,
At the time, yeah.
At the time, yeah. So I didn't know this. And then my dad ended up going into business, in the business world, because he just... He was like, the acting for me it's not going to work now, because I think he got scared. He went into business, and he was frustrated for the rest of his life. He was so frustrated. And it's not until, he got toward the end of his life. And by the way, I meant to mention, he ended up in telecom. He ended up at AT&T Capital, heading up the European office with my mom as his secretary because of the times.
And so,
yeah. And I mentioned that because what happened to me was I had this similar energy, I had this theatrical energy. And when I found that I couldn't express my voice, I ended up in corporate telecom. And so it's really funny, you are kind of navigating life to these points where you don't really know what's happening subconsciously until you learn to raise awareness to it. But, as a young person coming out of college, and, I graduated during the housing recession. So, the housing crisis. So, jobs were sparse. Nothing related to my major was there. And, I took a few jobs and ended up networking my way into telecom. And 5 years into it, I was like, well, shit, how did I do exactly what I learned, the lesson that my dad taught me not to do? Because not until he got toward the end of his life and he didn't know it was the end of his life, but he finally started pursuing his passions. But he had put them off for so long, and he had spent so many years being frustrated and unhappy and unfulfilled. And I think he finally realized that he wasn't living. That's part of why I also was so moved to become a coach, is because I know how many people live their lives passively.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can help anybody live their lives now while you're here, that's, I think, the most beautiful gift we can all give ourselves, is to actually savor our life, So, back to the question. What was the question?
No, that's okay. Actually, you bring up a statement that was brought up on this podcast. One of my first podcast guests, George Gerhard, had said, if you are, and his coach helped him with this, if you're not following your plan, you're living somebody else's.
Yeah.
And, it's funny. We started the podcast talking about anxiety and getting into our own head. Mm-hmm. And part of what also leads to frustration and anxiety in the business world and the entrepreneurial world is when we're forced or feel forced to take a job or to start a career in something that we're not passionate about.
Yeah.
And that causes so much frustration. Mm-hmm. I want to share with you, though, another parallel that we have here that I didn't know, or that you didn't know either. I didn't know this about you, and you didn't know that about me, or what I'm going to share next about me. Is I grew up also very similar to you in a arts kind of, my mother's a teacher, or is no longer a teacher, but was always very artistic in drawing. Mm-hmm. And I feel like art is passed down generationally. I just feel like it is.
Absolutely.
Right?
My dad was a drawer. Excellent drawer. I'm artistic too.
Yeah.
Totally
and
agree.
so for me, I always wanted to be an actor.
Yeah.
It was just a thing. I always enjoyed acting out and putting on little skits and plays. And my sister would kind of put together little plays with our family, and we'd put on little shows for the family. And I loved it. I really enjoyed it. And growing up, again, here's the parallel. While I was a very good actor, and teachers, I would take acting in school whenever given the opportunity, would see that I had when we say natural ability, it's more of that we're able to make the decision for the act for the moment, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about here. Is that like there's still a lot more to hone in on in terms of acting. So I don't want to hype myself in any other way, other than we're making good decisions based off of the script. We're choosing how we're going to say the words, and the director or the acting coach or the teacher is saying that's a good direction. You have good instincts.
Yeah.
So that was natural to me, but I think that a lot of times the arts are made to feel as though they're not a career.
Yeah.
And so people like us who grew up in homes where we have career-driven parents, both your parents, even though he was an artist, became in the corporate world, and your mother was working in the corporate world. My mother is a teacher in the board of ed. My father's a physician's assistant. Everybody around me is a professional of some sort. I can't go into acting.
Right.
So what do I get into?
Right.
I get into sales. I get into communications. I actually graduated Marist with radio, TV, film communications degree.
Okay.
Because I didn't want to admit that I wanted to be an actor. But if I could work behind the camera, that was, quote on air quotes, by the way, quote unquote professional, a professional job to work behind the camera. And then I was thinking my little plan was I'll work behind the camera and eventually I'll get in front of it.
Yeah, of course.
That was my plan. But I want to get back to, so that there's our parallel, right? Is that we both had that. And so I want to get back to this whole frustration and outlets. Because that is what led me to the podcast, to my YouTube channel, to my public speaking engagements, to keynoting, to all the different things I do in front of an audience. And learning that for me, what it was about acting was that I really get my energy from being with people and sharing in their joy and their happiness and inspiring them and helping them. And so that's where this comes out of. And so back to this idea of frustration is that while your father was frustrated, I believe that had he have found an outlet to be able to share his gift, right, it might have helped alleviate that. For you, so I want to bring it back to you now in that parallel that you were making with yourself and your dad. I feel that you did find your outlet, right, in coaching. And being able to, and also, let's go back to your corporate career here, and you could share some more into this now. So you went, and you're okay with me sharing who it was? So you went and started working for Verizon. And you had a very specific role at Verizon that I'd love for you to kind of dig into a little bit here that I think speaks to some of the performer in you.
So I was actually working at Verizon Corporate. Hopefully they're okay with me saying this. And I was working in the executive communications department of the external, like the broader external comms org. I was managing a zillion things. Like, I'm not going to get into the roster of responsibilities that I had, but the one piece that I pushed for was running a thought leadership platform that was going to help elevate the narrative, because, you know, the company, it does so much more than just a telecom company. You know, it's still branded very much that way from the consumer's point of view. Like, consumers have a tough time understanding how much more the company enables. And there are a lot of really cool things going on in, like, the 5G space and the metaverse space that the company's doing. But there's a struggle, like I just said, there's a struggle for the public to understand that. And so I wanted to create a platform that would help elevate that and push out some of the new ideas that were coming out of the company. And it was finally greenlit. Like, the project was finally greenlit, and I was like, this is great. Like, the intellectual side of me is lighting up, and I'm finally feeling really fulfilled after being here for 8 years, like, trying to find my way. And 6 months into it, roles changed, and, you know, they were like, the first thing to let go of is thought leadership. And I was like, that was like
bummed.
Dang it. I was like, that was the thing I really loved. And, you know, I kind of felt like I found the end of my road here, because I finally found something that I loved, and it took a long time, and it's dropped just like that. And, you know, it didn't even necessarily have to do with feeling valued as a human being. It was just like, you know, I realized that ultimately the culture didn't value what I valued. And that was the time to say yes to my dreams, and the fact that, you know, I mentioned earlier, I always knew I was going to be somebody who led my own path. And I'm also like, I have a tendency to feel like I think very differently from other people, right? And so not feeling seen or understood in my day-to-day life became very difficult. And I want to work with people who are on the same page, right? And we all do, right? Mm-hmm. But I just, I found myself not responding well to my authority figures anymore. Not like I wasn't talking back or anything. I just internally, I was like, I've had it. Like, I feel like I really know something. I feel like I really have something. And yet I can't use it. And that's when it was like, it's time for me to be my own boss. It's time for me to call the shots, because if I don't start now, I'm never going to grow into the person I know I am. And that's why I did it.
And you kind of brought that back with your dad, of like knowing that, seeing what he experienced, and recognizing it in yourself at a young age, thankfully, to be able to make that change. Just going back to the whole thought leader thing, that's where I'm saying about that. What I want to share with our audience here is, like, we have entrepreneurs and business leaders that are listening, and I always describe business leaders or executives at a company like Verizon or something like that, right? Yeah. And they might be experiencing very similar things, or they want to climb the corporate ladder, and it's their dream to be a CEO of a large corporation. And so what I want to share in this experience that you just had, and what I was trying to say about outlets, is that the Thought Leader Project, although it was greenlit and then shut down very quickly, what I get from it, from what you shared in there, you used the word create. You got to create a project. And when you think about yourself as an artist, when we think about ourselves as artists, we're creators. We're creating something. And it doesn't always have to be a performance of a play. It doesn't have to be a painting. Creating a project for a company, for a corporation, taps into our artistic side. And you said this, your whole side lit up. Right? And you could just imagine that side of your brain literally lighting up. That creative side, which is your artist side, which is your performer side. And so for our audience, of what I'm saying is that while you might be at a job, we're not telling you quit because you're a performer, right? It's find the places that you can apply the things that you enjoy in your life to that job in different ways. And that's what I was trying to say in the beginning, of like, that's what I felt like you did at Verizon. Was you found a way to apply your artistic side to your job. And when the tides changed, it was time for you to go. Because for you personally, and I want to get into that story, because if for you, if your plan for yourself had been to be a CEO or a C-suite executive at Verizon, you would have rolled with the tides. You would have found another project to put your artistic stamp on, right? But for you, you were meeting with a life coach at the time.
I was,
And I'm sure your life coach was asking you some really great questions that you internalized. And so I'd like to take us to that moment now of, one, the step that it took for you to find your life coach. What was the first step, the first moment that you said, I want somebody to help me and guide me in this path that I don't know quite yet?
Coming back to frustration, I had reached the end of my rope. Like, the culture wasn't a good fit. Like, I just wasn't feeling it. And I knew that I couldn't keep going where I was, and that I didn't know what the right fit was. I didn't know what the right next step was. So my friend, who also worked with me on the same team, she had a contact who specialized in career focus. And she coached on, basically, her whole methodology is she really, really digs into your values and your skills. And she evaluates what you light up talking about. And that was the moment. Like, I was just like, I don't know what to do, but it can't be this anymore. And the thought of going somewhere else to listen to somebody else direct me to do things that don't make sense to me, that's not it either. So how do I find a spot that either I feel like I'm in an environment with colleagues who jive with me, or I can carve my own path? Like, I need to find that. And so when my friend put me in touch with, her name's Angie Lindsay, by the way, Lindsay Careers, she's amazing. And I did 4 sessions with her. And after one session, she had a really good sense of what she felt like I'd be good at and what would kind of light me up. And so she gave me a few options. And, I think we had like 2 weeks in between sessions, something like that, something fast, And I looked at the life coaching avenue and I was like, well, what the heck? This is like who I am. I was like, I already do this in my life with my friends and my family all the time. They just don't always want me to do it. So if I can actually do this and help other people who actually want me to be coaching them, like, I was like, this could be me. Like, this is a dream. So the remainder of our sessions we spent on what steps do I need to take to become a life coach? What steps do I need to take in order to be able to find my voice and my focus? And it was, within one session, a life-changing experience. That's why I can't say enough about coaching, because it did so much for me, Yeah.
What were the other options that she gave you?
Oof. I think therapist. And I don't know. I think there were 4. I don't remember the other 2 because I feel like I quickly was like, that doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel right.
Were they along the lines of like therapists and people like that?
I don't think so. But they were still people-oriented, one-on-one people-oriented, consulting, which, like, I loved to poke holes in things. That would have been super fun. But I really like talking to people about people and their identities more. Like, how people form identities it is so interesting to me.
What I'm hearing too is like when I hear therapist or even consultant, I'm hearing inquisitive and listening.
Yeah.
In that those are like 2 qualities that if you're in those fields are super important.
Absolutely.
And my assumption is that those are great qualities of yours. and you just mentioned that as well.
Yes. Thank you.
When you were saying that you do this for your family and friends and everything, the question that comes to mind is, so what is it that you do? And I think this is also kind of like to break the myth or the ideas around life coaching of anybody can be a life coach, and I life coach every day. Of course, air quotes around all that, right?
Yeah, my favorite is I have a life. I could use that, right? I'm like,
yeah.
Okay.
So I think going to its infant stage of just helping friends and families and into what you do today, what was it that you were doing that you were able to correlate to what you do professionally now? Yeah,
it is the listening. So you hit the nail on the head there, but it's listening with an ear for what's really going on beneath what somebody's saying. And I think at the heart of good coaching is the adaptiveness to ask the right questions to raise the right awareness in the person you're coaching. And so what I used to do with friends and family unsolicitedly was, if they were struggling with something, I would, of course, want to be there listening and being supportive and like hugging and, just be that person. But I also always wanted to, kind of lead them down this path of understanding either how they got to where they are and how they can move past it, or helping them understand that, this isn't quite the situation that they think it is. Like it's not dire. Like you can make a change. And people want to hear what they want to hear if they're not ready for change or if they didn't ask for it. So when I say unsolicitedly, it was unsolicited. But when people do want that, it's life-changing, right? So what I do is it is that listening. It is asking the right questions, but it's really helping people raise awareness to how their thoughts are keeping them stuck in a loop or, holding them back in a certain way or keeping them in a certain mindset. And once you raise that awareness of whatever thoughts they're thinking about whatever it is that is making things hard for them, you get to choose. You get to decide, okay, now that I'm aware of this thought, is it helping me? And most of the time, obviously, it's not. Like, that's why you're here. That's why you're getting coached. So what thoughts can we think instead that are going to produce the right emotions in you to move forward with meaning? And that's the thing, too, is, there's a correlation. There's a direct correlation between the thoughts we think and the reality we have. And that's because every time we have a thought, it produces an emotion inside of us, right? And all of the things that we do in life, all of our actions are the result of an emotion. How you do something. I actually used this example on my Instagram stories the other days. Say you're driving and you're in a great mood and, you're stopping at every stop sign and you're letting other people go and, someone cuts you off and you're just like, it's fine. I'm good. You stay safe. Everything's good. You get to your destination. You get in a car and you're angry. You just had a fight and your thoughts are like boiling inside of you. Somebody cuts you off. You might slam on the brakes too hard. Somebody slams into you. You're not mindful of what's happening around you because you're so in your head and angry, and maybe you get into an accident. Like, you have two wildly different results from the same exact activity because you had different emotions. So when you help people understand the correlation between the thoughts they're having, the impact it has on their reality that they shape for themselves, they develop this awareness that they get to change that. And the possibility of actually creating your dream life doesn't sound so far-fetched anymore. There's a lot of science behind coaching. There's a lot of psychology behind it, but it's often dismissed as like woo-woo energy work because people don't understand it very widely yet. And whenever I tell people I'm a life coach, still I get, oh, so you coach executives or you're a business coach? And I'm like, no, I'm a life coach. And maybe it's a testament to what it's called. I'm not really sure because people think that they can navigate their lives on their own. But the thing is, we're not taught that we can regulate our emotions and respond instead of react. We're not taught that growing up. We're taught to just live passively and absorb what comes at us. And I think the power of flipping that narrative is what's finally going to get people to understand how impactful and tangible life coaching is, rather than thinking that it's this intangible, you can't really show any effective results type of thing. Because I feel like that's still a hurdle out there, this understanding of life coaching. It's not quite there yet.
Yeah, I can attest to everything you just said there because there's a lot of things that come to mind for me. One, just personal experience, which I won't dig too far into, but other than I remember growing up seeing a therapist. I was a behavioral problem.
I heard you were class clown, right?
I was class clown and everything else that gets you to the principal's office. That was me. And so I would see a therapist every once in a while. And I remember it would be, and I said every once in a while because it would be like, until I'm like, quote unquote, healed. I've done a lot of air quotes in this episode. It'd be like when I'm quote unquote healed, right? It's like, all right, so in third grade, I had all these behavioral issues, go see a therapist outside of school, whatever, see the therapist and everything. And then all of a sudden, fourth grade is awesome. I don't have any issues. And in fifth grade, I have issues all over again to go see a therapist, right? So it's like this like roller coaster, right? And it was only when I got older in my teens when the same roller coaster was happening of like seeing a therapist, not seeing a therapist. And we're talking about medical therapists, this is. And I remember in my teens, having a really great session with my therapist. She was so cool. Her name was Sandy.
Yeah.
And she had these two Siamese cats that would like walk around. And I'm not a pet person. So it was like really a thing for me to see them walking around. And then she would smoke her long Virginia Slims.
Oh gosh.
Sitting in her lazy boy, listening to me. And she would just listen. And I would just talk to her for like an hour.
Yeah.
And then it was like literally like me talking for an hour. And then she'd be like, okay. And our time's up.
Right.
And I'll see you next week. And I remember leaving her office because I was driving now, so I was going on my own, and thinking, how do I live without this? How do people live without this? Where I felt like it was me talking for an hour, but she would interject with little questions.
Yes.
Right?
How does that make you feel? Or, well, it matters what you think. What do you think about this?
Yes.
I had a therapist too, and I loved her growing
and little
up.
Insights, little thoughts. She never put judgment on.
Exactly.
I was usually complaining about my dad.
Yeah.
She never put judgment on him. She never put judgment on anybody. She never said somebody was right or wrong.
Right.
It was just, so how do you feel about that?
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
And I just remember that feeling. And then when I ended up, again, quote unquote, not needing her. I might as well just stick with the air quotes here. Not needing her in my life. Things changed again for me. Of that what was happening that I didn't know then was self-awareness.
Yeah.
And that self-awareness was disappearing again. And back to what you were just saying.
That's what happened to me.
Right? Of this, we're just reacting
Yes.
We're drinking, we're partying, we're living our life, and we're just reacting.
Coping. Yep.
Coping.
Yeah.
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 You want to dig into that a little bit?
Oh gosh, sure.
No? Go ahead.
We can. I mean, I did all of that. You know, I got into my teens and, you know, things just kind of went so awry after my dad passed. And I didn't feel supported from my friends. Like I didn't have a good support system. And I dived into drinking, you know, by the end of high school. And went to college. You know, everybody parties in college, so it's normalized, right? And
right.
You know, you're not really realizing how much you're kind of running away from. And for me, that self-awareness, like that deep self-awareness I had growing up, that I was so proud of. Like I used to have teachers kind of look at me like, "Who is this little adult inside of this body?" And I would like that made me feel so good and like viable. Like that gave me so much validation that like I really am deep, you know? And all of that I really loved about myself and like appreciated my self-awareness, it went away. Like I pushed it away when I was in college because I think I was just so hurt and scared and felt so lonely. And by the time I got out of college, I was still just feeling like nothing had changed. I still didn't really have a good support system. And, you know, I ended up in a relationship that I won't say I stayed in it way too long. I think I gave it enough of a chance. And then he had been my best friend. And as soon as we started dating, he turned on a dime. And my major was stupid. Like everything I chose was stupid. I wasn't going to succeed in anything. I was just like, I'm lucky. Like I said earlier, I'm lucky. Like I held my own in the background. And I ended up leaving that and giving myself the support system finally. Like I finally was like, you know, that person you used to be, she's still there and you need to find her. And I did. I found my self-awareness again and I put tons of work into raising it back to the level that it was at before. Because, you know, I remained so aware to other people. I remained so aware to what other people needed and what they were really feeling and all the things underneath what they were actually saying. But I stopped listening to myself in the same regard. And so when I finally got into my mid to late 20s, I decided to choose myself again and keep raising that awareness to a point that, you know, a few years later, I got up the courage to leave the safety net and start this. So,
yeah, and like back to this whole idea of life coaching and what you're doing and the work that you just did there. And I have a question for you on that. But is one of the quotes that I've heard about life coaching and coaching in general is if Michael Jordan had a coach, what makes you think you don't need one? Right?
Yeah.
And not that Michael Jordan had a life coach, but Phil Jackson, and for our younger generation here, but you should know who Michael Jordan is, darn it.
Seriously. He's still on commercials.
That's right. But Phil Jackson was Michael Jordan's basketball coach on the Bulls. We'll call him that. We'll give those air quotes. But Phil Jackson followed the Zen philosophy, and he used a lot of that with the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah.
And where this really comes into life coaching is in the 97 season when they brought in Dennis Rodman, who was a total head case and admittingly today too, and went through his bouts of alcoholism and drug abuse and everything. When the Bulls wanted to bring him in because he was such a dominant force rebounding and defensively, and I'm going to correlate this to real life in a second, the Bulls, the team was very concerned. But Michael Jordan felt that, one, he was necessary to help them win a championship, so very goal-oriented. So when we think about our goals and seeing a challenge in front of our goals, how can we either adapt to that challenge? How can we work around that challenge? How could we embrace that challenge?
Right.
So he embraced that challenge. And then using Phil Jackson's philosophy, that Zen philosophy of listening, of being patient, of not changing the rules, but adapting a little bit to the personality to where, hey, you know what? Dennis doesn't need to be at this team meeting right now. Let's just let him go off on his little tangent in Vegas, which, by the way, was documented in The Last Dance, right?
Yeah.
But Michael Jordan was knocking on his door the next morning to make sure he was showing up to the next practice that was important.
Yeah.
so the coach kind of was what kept them together and being able to work together. And so back to the statement of, if Michael Jordan had a coach, what makes you think you don't need one? The other thing I want to bring up here is something you said about choices.
Yeah.
Is what's so important that we understand, and what life coaching and self-awareness helps us understand, and is when people think woo-woo, we think of, I go back to the Stoics, right? When you think about Marcus Aurelius and all of these great philosophers, right? That are regarded as great philosophers. They're the ones who came up with self-awareness. They're the ones who say, you make your choice.
Right.
I can't make you frustrated, angry, upset, or happy.
Right.
You choose to be any of those emotions, right?
Yes.
And so where I want to go back to you on this is, in your story there of finding yourself throughout your 20s, and you probably experienced it similar to me, it sounds like we have so many things in common here, is that what I think a life coach does is that they make the process of self-awareness a lot easier. Whereas for us, it took us 10 years of looking for self-development tapes, listen to Tony Robbins or the other, whatever is popular at the time. Positive quotes, affirmations, reading them in the mirror, staring at books. So let's go to that process there, and then correlating it to what a life coach ended up doing, helping you do.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't really even know how to thread this needle, but
well, tell us about, so that journey, right, of self-awareness, right? So what were you looking for? Were you doing, let's for me, for instance, and you just jump on this. I ordered $700 worth of Tony Robbins tapes, and I listened. I went to a hotel. I by the way, I made believe I had a job because I was unemployed at the time. I made believe I had a job, and I was going to a hotel locally, and I was positioning myself in their lobby, and I put my tapes on, and I had a notebook, and I was just literally taking Tony Robbins courses in this hotel lobby.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I had known at the time when I was 26, 27, and I left that relationship, and I didn't know, I had to move back in with my mom, and I was like, oh my gosh, my life is not shaping up the way I envisioned it when I was a kid. I wish I had known about life coaching then, almost 10 years ago. You're right. It's a decade-long journey to raising your awareness to a level of clarity of who you want to be and where to go. And had I known 10 years ago that life coaching existed, I would have jumped on that train so fast. I would have been like, yes, help me understand what I need to be thinking through. And for me, I didn't jump on the tapes. My mom was actually very into a lot of new age stuff at that time. So I had a good influence of things like this. But I just took back what used to work for me when I was younger. I listened to music in solitude. I just wrote aimlessly. I would just sit by myself and think, and I did that for a while until I felt like I knew what I needed and what I didn't need. And sometimes just sitting in solitude and letting yourself be honest with yourself teaches you the boundaries that you need to create in order to protect your well-being. Obviously, it's not always easy to create boundaries, especially as a people pleaser. You don't want to tell anybody, I don't really have time to spend on something that isn't my goal right now. But I think for me, that was the first step, was figuring out what my boundaries were. And over time, those boundaries created enough space for me to find that truest voice again. It was really the boundaries that provided me that space to explore who I was, in the wake of all this trash I left behind me. It's how do I find my way back to that really amazing girl that I was in now my adult womanhood? How do I find my way back to that person in a way that makes sense to incorporate everything I've been through? And I think that I didn't really have coaching to help me get there. I had to do it on my own until I met Angie. And at that point, it was already very pointed, how do I find the job that makes sense to me? How do I make money in a way that makes me feel good inside and not I'm just dead and selling my soul. I mean, and so yeah, I mean, that was my journey to finding coaching. Was like, it was a lot of self-guided. I did it myself without knowing that it was coaching, but it took me so much longer.
Which gets us to your CEO journey, which you wrote about how hard it is. A couple of things I want to touch on there that you just mentioned there. So you talked about listening to music in solitude, writing aimlessly, and sitting in solitude and just thinking. And what I wanna talk about in those three things there is so many people hear the word meditation and go, I can't meditate.
Oh, that's so
I don't
true.
know how to meditate. Meditation is so hard. But those three things are like meditation. Those are essentially meditation.
Absolutely.
And so what I want to share with our audience is that you can meditate. You did it by just listening to music in solitude and, just listening to music over and over again and whatever it is, or writing about whatever it is, or allowing the thoughts to come in and listen to those thoughts and move on to another thought and just not getting wrapped up in the thought. You're meditating and finding a way to get closer to your goal. The other thing I want to touch on, which is a proverb that I love saying, and I've said it here before and always do and always will, is what you're telling me. Life coaching was around 10 years ago, right?
Right.
But the teacher won't appear until the student is ready. And so it wasn't until you or I were ready for a coach that we got one. So that's kind of like, I want to just kind of put that as a little package for everyone listening here and move into a little bit of the entrepreneurial journey for you. So you're fresh. You are 9 months old. You still got the pacifier in your mouth. And you're this cute little baby right now in the entrepreneurial journey. And I'm not far behind you or ahead of you, however you want to look at it. My question for you is, in your bio to me, you mentioned it's hard, right? It's no joke. And I just want to touch on that real quick because the word entrepreneur has been glorified these days. And it's like everybody is, I want to be an entrepreneur. And that's wonderful. The word's been around forever, but for right now, it's a big word. And I just want to maybe let people know the truth behind it, right? Is that it's not just, hey, I opened up, boom, I got my business. But there was more that came to it. So just share with us a little bit about that and some of the journey and what you've experienced so far. Yeah,
sure. So for 1 second, I just want to go back to the meditation thing, which is that it is so hard. I don't know how to do it. Like those are thoughts that you can choose. And if you choose to keep them, it's going to be hard for you to meditate. But I do also like to tell people that meditation can be whatever you want it to be. It can be all those things that I just mentioned. It can be listening to music in solitude. It can be just sitting and thinking. Meditation does not have to be what so many people think it is, which is truly clearing your mind. Like the brain is not capable of that. And it is being able to be a little bit passive about your thoughts, let them drift. And that can be anything. Like your drive to work is meditation. Shower thoughts, meditation. I think that people just need to open up their minds to what it is and adapt it to what's going to work for them so that they can reap the benefits. And people they're doing it without realizing it. They're just not associating it. Like I said, the driving and the shower thoughts. And so I just wanted to say that. Being a CEO, yes, it is, you could say it's fun, but it's hard.
Tell us about your hat closet.
My hat closet,
all your hats you wear.
Yeah. I mean, you have to realize, especially as a solopreneur. So if you're a solopreneur listening, like you literally do everything. I am 9 months in, as you've mentioned, a baby. I'm almost at the point where I'm willing to outsource some things with like a virtual assistant, maybe some lead gen help. But up until now, and probably for the next few months, it's all me. And so you not only do you have to learn new skills and execute new skills, because, a lot of entrepreneurs are idea people. I'm one of them. I'm an idea person. I'm the idea man. But you also have to execute, and you have to know how to execute. You have to train yourself to execute. You need to give yourself stability. And aside from learning new skills, you're constantly learning new sides of yourself. So you're diving headfirst into an emotional journey without realizing it if you think that entrepreneurship is glorified. You might not realize how much inner work you have to do to get this thing off the ground. And that's not to scare anybody, because I think that obviously as a coach, I think inner work is the most like liberating and amazing thing. It's not easy, but it is so deeply gratifying to grow and learn about yourself. But you have to understand that is part of the package. You know, you have to be prepared for the ups and downs. I mean, we started the show with my freak out the other day. That was one of my roller coaster moments. You know, they happen because even when you get to the point of you've trained yourself to execute, you've learned the content development, you've learned the sales, you've learned to put on the faces at the networking events. Like, you've learned all of these. You've learned billing. Like, you've learned a whole online platform. Like, you have learned copywriting more than you ever have. All these things that you have to do to market yourself and be the thing that you're trying to be, the service that you're trying to provide, you have to do all of that. And you have to understand that it's going to bring on roller coasters. You are going to find moments where you're so caught up in all of those things I just mentioned that you start questioning your direction. You start questioning, am I on the right path? Do people want this product? You know? And so, yes, it is hard. It is hard, but it's a good hard, you know? Like anything really, really gratifying in this life, it's good hard.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple books that you made me think about while you were saying that. Have you read The E-Myth? Michael Gerber. So highly suggest that. The E-Myth, Michael Gerber, The E-Myth Revisited. It's kind of like a little bit a more up-to-date version. So that's the one that you want to look up, is The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. Speaking about working on your business versus in your business. And then somebody who learned from him, and kind of like an addition to that book would be Gino Wickman's Traction, which also kind of takes the concepts of the E-Myth Revisited and then applies it into the entrepreneurial space.
Okay.
And then his second book, Rocket Fuel, which then makes a very distinct distinction between a visionary entrepreneur, which is what you're associating
the idea
with.
Man. Yep.
Exactly. When you said that, that's what triggered all of this for me, which is a visionary, and then the implementer. And the implementer visionary. And how important both of those play a role in the success of your business, and identifying which one you are, so that you can hire the people around you to compensate for those for what's missing.
Right.
I hate to use the word weakness, because I think that we all have strengths, and then because we have strengths, there's always a yin and a yang. There are things that are missing. They're not weaknesses, they're just things that are missing. And so we just need to find the person to compensate for that. And so that being said, one of my experiences that I had was when I hired a VA, and so shout out to Cecile and Pepper and her agency. When I hired her, my world opened up. You know, of course, there's always an expense in everything we do, and that's the first way we look at things is as an expense. But when we realize that it actually leads to profit, is it really an expense? Yeah, I guess it's a line item on the expense sheet, but it's something that leads to profit. So it's kind of like it opens up the world. And why I bring that up is because life coaching is very similar. In that you are an entrepreneur, you are a business leader, you're an executive, wherever you are in your life. A life coach like you is someone who can help them level up. And it doesn't have to be executive leadership. It doesn't have to be entrepreneur. It doesn't have to be all specific. It's just, if I can help you, being you, Brianna, if I can help you become more self-aware, learn more about yourself, overcome your own like self-limiting beliefs, you're going to be better at your job. Which in turn, more profitable. And if that job is not profitable, then you will get a better position somewhere else.
Exactly.
So I think that all kind of comes full circle. Moving into the work that you do today, you mentioned that you have a new program that you're starting. So before we conclude this episode here, I would love for you to share that new program with us and what it is and how people can get their hands on it.
I would love to. I mean, it's coming at such a good time in the conversation because we spoke so much about imposter syndrome. So just to give a lead into what this program is, I've spent the last 9 months doing general life coaching. I helped anybody with any goal that they had or that they wanted to get to. I took them on as a client. I wasn't specialized because I wanted to kind of find where my sweet spot was. And throughout the myriad of clients that I have had, I've realized that the thing that lights me up and makes me feel most effective, and I get I'd say the most gratitude from, are the clients who need help eradicating that imposter syndrome, really stepping into who they are, reclaiming their confidence. You know, I talked about the internal family systems, and I say that for a reason because so much of our limiting beliefs come from those parts of ourselves as kids that learned things that are holding us back still. And so this program that I'm releasing, it's launching on October 3rd. It's called Mindset Makeover, and it's my first signature program. And it's designed to really help people find clarity. It's really designed to help people find their most authentic selves, find their voice. And, you know, you talk in terms of like a business coach and how that's going to help them become more profitable. Even just in your life, it's the same thing. You know, you hire a life coach, you develop your confidence, you really step into that person that you know you are inside, and you become able to be that person on the outside without fear, and you develop this feeling of safety again in your life, in your body. Everything around you benefits. Like your entire life becomes more profitable. If you want to, you know, remove the dollar sense of the word profitable, everything in your life benefits. And so that's what my program is. It takes you through a journey. There's 6 modules. There's actually like a whole there's a whole design behind it, but it's still customized because people are different. People have different things that they need to bring up to the surface in order to heal and get to that point of feeling truly themselves and safe and no longer insecure. So there's customization, but there's a methodology behind it too. So I'm really excited because, I mean, I've had breakthroughs in 1 session. I've had breakthroughs in 10 sessions, and it depends on the person. And this program, the way I've designed it, because it's not kind of just an open-ended course or like an open-ended amount of sessions, everybody's going to get results at the end of the program, no matter what. Mm-hmm. So it's called Mindset Makeover. I'm really psyched.
So cool. I love that. I love the name of it, Mindset Makeover.
Thanks.
And you mentioned that also in your website, kind of like shining sunlight on a space and like really recreating a space somewhere, right?
Yes. So I'm also, so you mentioned at the beginning, I'm a lifestyle expert too. So I'm also very passionate about creating an environment that is going to help support people in these journeys, right? So, you know, a lot of homes, like very tactically, like you might not have a space in your own home that makes you feel like it's you. So how do you create a space that makes you feel like you're actually rejuvenating yourself? Like, I have a whole philosophy on depriving yourself and how it's not a virtue. And it comes down to like, do you give yourself the things that are lighting you up or are making you feel comfortable or safe or joyful? Like I did this blog post a while back about a marble penguin because I spent $50 on a marble penguin at Crate and Barrel. And, you know, if you hear some of the voices in my head from my family, like, why would you spend $50 on this penguin that's just going to sit there on a shelf? I'm like, yes, but every time I look at this penguin, I smile. Every single time I look at it, I smile. Like I didn't buy it frivolously because I wanted to have a cute penguin on my shelf. It brings me joy. And so how do we create those things, those like items, whatever it is, in your space that are going to bring you that joy and comfort that allow you to thrive as you're moving through change? So yeah, I'm just also that person who knows where the best restaurants are, how to simplify your life. Like people are like, why do you spend $500 on a Roomba? I'm like, because it cleans for me while I do other things. You know, how can we find ways? Yeah, how can we find ways to simplify your life and make it more exciting and more joyful and more indulgent for you?
I love that. And just another one little note on this whole, like, if you don't think coaching helps, Warren Buffett attributes his financial success to the courses he took, the Dale Carnegie public speaking courses he took. That's what he attributes his success to. And as a public speaking coach for myself, when we're talking about public speaking, sure, we're talking about the nuances in speaking and putting a speech together and all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
My biggest focus when I'm dealing with one-to-one coaching or a workshop is self-confidence.
Yeah.
That's my focus. That's what people are more concerned about. They're more concerned about their fears and overcoming them than they are about their speech. A lot of them, they're professionals. They've written before. They've written books. They've written essays. They've gone through school, and they don't have a problem putting together thoughts on paper, right words. They have a problem standing in front of a room, and a lot of it has to do with self-confidence.
Totally.
So I'm not getting on a whole spiel on that. My point that I'm making here is that, again, on coaching, is that Warren Buffett, I just watched there's a movie a documentary on him on HBO right now. I just watched that, so it's fresh in my mind. Talked about he would not be where he is today if he did not attend the Dale Carnegie classes and go through that work that they put him through.
Yeah.
So that's just another testament for coaching. I always like to understand how we can create change in our world and do work that's bigger than ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I had asked you that too, and you spoke about working with women in transitional housing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that it's not a completed project yet. It's kind of like to be continued right now that you're working towards.
Yeah.
I'm just interested in why that's important to you and how you might be able to progress the work there.
Yeah, so there's an organization. It's based out of Morristown, New Jersey, and my boyfriend actually sits on the chair. So there's a connection there. I don't have any personal experience really being out of a home. There was a very short period in between my parents' divorce. We lived in a hotel for like a month, but like I wouldn't really attribute that to feeling homeless. But I think knowing what this organization does for our community, because my boyfriend tells me, like, I know anecdotally what impact it has. And these women, they're in the stages of, they have different phases, for the people in the organization who entered like right off the street, and then they take them all the way up through being able to re-enter society and get a job. And so it would be that latter stage, those women that I'm hoping to work with, because not only will they have the infrastructure provided by the organization to help them get a job, like tactically, find a new home that they can live in, but I would be able to complement that by providing the infrastructure of the mindset so that they never have to end up back where they were. And a lot of these women, they come from domestic abuse households. That's how they end up becoming homeless. And so if I can help them really feel safety in their bodies, like that's one, like that's an amazing thing that they don't have yet. And two, to be able to help them thrive beyond and keep growing and look back at where they were and say, I cannot believe how far I've come and that I never have to do that again. Nobody should be in this situation, but if I can help people move even farther beyond that, like what an honor that would be. So that is potentially on the horizon. We'll see if it comes to fruition.
Well, it's great work. I think what you said there too, which is like a whole other session, but you kind of dismissed being in a hotel for 2 weeks, right? And that's our safety mechanism.
It is,
right?
Yeah,
the little girl, and she's being safe. But think about your mom in that moment, right?
Yeah.
And the experience that she had of being in a hotel with her little girl and trying to find a home for them. Yeah. Those were probably the longest 2 weeks of her life. And so the work that you're doing with this group and that your boyfriend is doing with this group is like, as you said, transformational. Is incredible work. And so I commend you for that. I look forward to hearing the progress on that.
Thank you.
It's strong work. I want to thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a blast.
Thanks for stepping into your power.
Yeah.
You're awesome.
It was my pleasure.
And she is wearing the brightest yellow sweater today, and I absolutely love it. So I love that. Today was yellow day at my daughter's school, and you're wearing yellow today.
Somehow I just knew.
And it just really speaks to you stepping in your power. And one last thing about you that I want to say is it's so funny that we started off with the moment of like being anxious coming on here, and you really blossomed into you and into yourself, and we're really went super comfortable speaking about the things that you're passionate about. And so I just want to put like another fine point on that of like, when you're in your passion and when you're in your flow, you're in your place. And I remember when we went up front to take the picture together, you had your power pose, and that's who you are. So congratulations on your entrepreneurial journey. Keep rocking it. And thanks so much for coming on the show.
You bet. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to the Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast. Thank you again to our sponsor, Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. That's DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. This episode was produced by Uncle Mike at the iHeart Studios in Poughkeepsie. Special thanks to Lara Rodrian for the opportunity and my team at Michael Esposito Inc.